Arc 6, Chapter 13, Ridicule of the Sands. Space distorted, the world broke, and they fell straight into the rift in reality that formed. As it were made of fragile thin paper, the world was easily torn apart. Swallowed by this distorted space, Subaru's eardrums heard no sound despite the overwhelming visual spectacle. He only heard a voice screaming as if someone were calling him. Even that became distant and eventually vanished entirely. The sensation of touch also drifted away. Fingers that had been clinging to him peeled off, and the distance between them grew. With no one around, abandoned in this empty place, it seemed like he had become completely alone, tormented by that loneliness and sorrow. Subaru's consciousness slowly floated back into the surface. And then...
How long are you planning to sleep? Wake up already, Barasu.
Feeling something sharp at his side, Subaru shut up with a yelp from a sudden jab. Having jumped up reflexively, the sand clinging onto his body fell to the ground. Coughing, he spat out dirt which had gotten into his mouth.
What? What happened?
Rubbing his eyes, he checked his surroundings as he rose to his feet. With shaky knees and a poor foothold, he staggered to his feet awkwardly. Beneath his feet, a sea of fine grains of sand remained. As his consciousness returned, Subaru could determine that this was an extension of the Agoria sand dunes. However, the view around him was not clear because it was dark. Far too dark. Amidst the darkness where glazing his own hands was not possible, Subaru's eyes caught the presence of a small artificial light.
You can sleep so well in such an emergency. It is amazing. No words.
A stern voice hit him, and the owner of the light snorted. That which emitted the light was a type of magical stone. Processed lagnomite ore had been fashioned into a tool like a lantern. Looking at the face illuminated by the light, Subaru raised his eyebrows.
Ram, is that you?
Who else could you see? Rem? That's a ridiculous guess.
You and Rem look alike, but everything about you makes it obvious you're not her.
In response to Ram, who seemed harsher than usual, Subaru gives a bitter reply. Receiving the lantern from her, he looked around the area, illuminating it.
This place? Where is it? What happened?
Ram also wants to know the whereabouts of this place. As for what happened, it is 3 times worse than what Barasu can imagine.
Does that mean you expect me to be an optimist? Do you look down on pessimists?
In this case, I wonder which is better.
Her reply was probably accompanied by a shrug. In the darkness, where even Ram, who was right beside him, couldn't clearly be seen, the space illuminated by the light felt strangely vast. They had most likely ended up inside some sort of hollow space. Overhead, a faintly high ceiling could be seen, and the continuous walls proved the depth of the area.
Can't feel any airflow. Can't see the sky. You mean we were sent somewhere?
If what Beatrice-sama said before we were separated was correct, then the distortion of space is likely the cause.
Separated? That's right! Separated! Where are the others?
As he listened to Ram's flat, emotionless words, Subaru's understanding finally caught up to reality. He swept the light left and right, searching for any silhouette other than Ram's. But no matter how much he illuminated the area, none of the figures he hoped to see appeared.
As you can see, we were separated. Barasu's magic nullified the Watchtower's trick. Maybe instead of going into the right path, we were trapped in a distorted space-time, where we will wander forever. I can't say for sure.
Is now really the time for that? Why are you so calm about this? The fact that it's you and me together means it's totally Yatara!
To Ram's serene explanation, Subaru turned pale and raised his voice. He could easily recall Beatrice's scream and the space tearing open before his eyes. That rift had swallowed the entire group and dragged them into another space. At that time, Subaru and Ram were both traveling along, but they should have been in different groups. Subaru was riding Patrasche, and Ram was in the dragon carriage.
Given this kind of separation, it seems physical contact wasn't a condition for who stayed together. At the moment of being drawn into the rift, I believe I was holding Rem. And yet here we are.
Peiko was clinging to me too, but I don't see her anywhere. You don't see her either, right? Don't tell me it's really just you and me here. What kind of pairing is this supposed to be?
If the condition that separated was not contact, then was there any other reason? Their group was composed of 8. There was no particular common feature that only Subaru and Ram shared. Was the group completely random?
No! Figuring out the conditions can wait. More importantly, we have to regroup with everyone. No! There's something even more important. Rem! You and I are a pair. So that makes things a bit better. If everyone else was split up with at least someone, then there's still hope. But if someone ended up alone, and if that someone was Rem, then that would be the worst possible outcome.
Emilia and Julius, the two who had shouldered the group's combat strength this time, should be fine. Meili and Beatrice too would either manage somehow on their own using their respective abilities. As for Anastasia, or rather, Echidna, she likely had a trump card that repelled lust. The rest of the group might even be better off than Subaru and Ram pairing. Although less honorable than other ones, Subaru and Ram's combination was still manageable.
But Rem's a different story.
Unlike the others, Rem can't move or act on her own. Even if someone was alongside her, protecting the perpetually sleeping girl would turn any kind of understanding into the next to impossible task. And the worst of all, if Rem were to be completely isolated from the others, then death would be the only thing that awaited her in this lonely sea sand.
It's important for us to meet up with everyone else, but the top priority is securing Rem! I can't leave her alone in such a lonely place. That alone is absolutely out of the question. I absolutely won't let that happen.
Barasu.
I was the one who said I'd bring her. I thought maybe she could wake up if we met the sage. And now this is what happened. No way. Damn it! Not Rem of all people!
Barasu, calm yourself. Getting worked up right now won't...
Why are you so calm about this? Just because your memories of Rem are gone? Are you even worried about her?
Don't be ridiculous!
Imagining the worst possibility, Subaru started mumbling desperately about the future, and rapidly spat out a stream of despair and regret. Hearing Subaru speak, Ram could not stand it and exploded. She grabbed the front of Subaru's shirt and slammed him hard against the sand wall behind him.
Do you really think you're the only one worried about Rem? Don't get so full of yourself, Barasu. Even without my true feelings, Ram is still Rem's older sister. Don't treat me like a fool! I can still feel a faint connection with her, so at the very least, she's safe for now. Just trust that and calm down for now.
She wasn't making a face that fully exposed her emotions, but in her eyes, which tried to maintain composure, Subaru could clearly see the unrest and sorrow she couldn't hide. Seeing that, he finally let the tension fall from his stiff shoulders. Ram noticed this and let go of him. Released from the wall, Subaru lowered his head.
My bad. I'm sorry. What I said just now, I was being an idiot. Completely out of line.
It's not like that's unusual. Barasu spent all day apologizing for everything dumb that comes out of his mouth just by being alive, you'd never have time to do anything else. So, just stop wasting time.
Yeah. My bad.
Feeling that sharp jab from Ram was her way of settling things. Subaru offered one last apology. Then he slapped his cheeks with all his strength, regaining his fighting spirit. Even if Ram had reassured him about Rem's current safety, the fear that she might be all alone hadn't vanished. The urgency of reuniting with the others hadn't changed.
Anyway, let's hurry and regroup. Ram, can't you use that shared sense thing to track where Rem is?
It's difficult. Since she's asleep, all I can really sense is her heartbeat. If we're talking about other options, there is clairvoyance, but that's not something we can rely on.
Why not?
These sand dunes are crawling with witch beasts, and there are almost no ordinary animals or plants around. Clairvoyance is not able to borrow their sights if their wavelength does not match with Rom's. It doesn't work with witch beasts. At this time, Rom is only able to borrow the eyes from Barasu's ground dragon.
Patrasche, huh? Still, that's more than enough. If Patrasche or even Gian are with someone, I want to confirm that. Having the dragon carriage intact would be especially helpful.
That wouldn't be very useful.
Subaru felt frustrated at Ram's disinterested attitude and tilted his head in thought. Now was the time to collect as much information as possible in order to regroup. And yet, he was unable to understand why Ram was hesitating here. However, the answer appeared before he could even doubt into his words.
Huh?
Suddenly, out of the corner of his eyes, Subaru noticed a light that didn't come from his lantern. Memories of that dreadful light flashed vividly through his mind, and Subaru instinctively flinched. But what appeared was unrelated, something moving with a gentle glow. The light gradually came closer, and slowly the figure became clearer.
Ramson? Natsuki-kun? It seems that your discussion's over.
Anastasia and Patrasche?
Hearing the familiar Kararagi dialect, Subaru slightly lifted his head in surprise. Looking ahead, he saw Anastasia atop Patrasche's back, swaying a lantern different from his own in one hand. In response to Anastasia's question, Ram bowed while lifting the hem of her robe on the spot.
Thank you for your consideration, Anastasia-sama. May I ask, what's the situation in the surrounding area?
I just checked all the way back, but I couldn't see anyone else. Only 3 of us are out here, and this girlie.
I see.
Keep your spirits up. Might not be much comfort, but still.
Thank you for your concern. Yes, I shall do so.
To Anastasia on top of the dragon, Ram responded politely. From the course of the conversation, Subaru vaguely understood that Anastasia had been searching around. But that was the extent of his satisfaction, for the lack of explanation left him displeased.
Hey, Ram! I thought it was just the 2 of us here. What the hell is going on? Explain!
I do not remember telling you that Rom and Barasu were alone. Who assumed that and started panicking? Unsightly.
You'd come off a lot cuter if you just admitted you were also worried about Rem. Too much to think clearly, Nay-sama.
Hearing Subaru, Ram snorted her nose with her usual tone. Sensing a return to her usual self in that attitude, Subaru walked over to Anastasia.
Setting aside the part about getting messed with, I'm glad to see you're safe, Anastasia. Oh, that's a relief.
Aren't you confusing this deception of yours with a misunderstanding? I'd be relieved to learn that I'm not alone. Besides, Natsuki-kun's ground dragon, Patrasche-chan, was a very helpful good girl.
With one foot on the stirrup, Anastasia hesitantly began dismounting Patrasche. In response, Patrasche slowly crouched down on the spot, helping her dismount. As expected of such a capable ground dragon, a Chad ground dragon, even despite being a girl.
There's no one else hiding around here, right? Is it really just the four of us?
Including Patrasche-chan. There's no doubt that it's the four of us. Amelia-san and Julia said I had no reason not to come forth. Can't say the same about Meili-chan, though.
You think she might have used the chaos to slip away? Not impossible.
Picturing the braided girl in his mind, Subaru mulled over what kind of decision Meili might make. Just before they were split up, Subaru had exposed the fact that Meili had secretly kept some witch beasts as backup. Thanks to Return by Death, he knew that in a previous loop, Meili had used those witch beasts to defend the dragon carriage from both the Watchtower's assault and the horde of courtesan bears. However, since that was an event that had not occurred in this loop, essentially, the one who knew Meili's reason for having the sand earthworm follow them was the girl herself. Given how things had turned out, it wouldn't be strange if Meili took the opportunity to slip away from the group and tried to leave the dunes on her own.
But she won't do that. That's what I want to believe.
Is that hope? Or could it be trust?
Just call it a wish. Anyway, what did things look like around here?
Setting aside his stance on Meili, Subaru asked Anastasia to report on her scouting. She put her hands in the sleeves of her robe and tilted her head, saying,
Well, judging from what I saw, we're certainly in the sand dunes, but I'm thinking this place might actually be underground.
Underground? How could there be an underground in the sand dunes?
Under all that sand of the dunes, a cave. More of a hollow, so to speak, but the temperature's obviously lower than above ground, and the air is also feeling kinda heavy.
As Anastasia gave a gesture to emphasize the chill by shaking the front of her robe, Subaru nodded in agreement. Certainly, the chill of this current space they were in was much stronger than the one they'd just left. With the high ceiling and a skyless space, her theory made sense.
Underneath the dunes? Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this. I pray that this isn't a sand earthworm's lair.
That's...
It was a plausible scenario. They had seen themselves that sand earthworms lived underground. And considering the size of the one Meili had controlled, this hollow would be more than big enough. Thinking about the creature's eyeless biology, a pitch black space like this would fit perfectly.
I mean, just look at this team! Its combat ability is way too questionable. Me, Ram, and Anastasia? Did they deliberately group all the non-combatants together?
Amelia-sama's own knight, proudly describing himself as a non-combatant. How hopeless.
I'm just stating the reality. Without Beatrice, I can't be so conceited as to rely on my whip skills alone.
Compared to the others who had ways to protect themselves, their group was severely lacking in combat ability. Ram was limited in what she could do, and Subaru without Beatrice hardly needed to be mentioned.
By the way, what about Beatrice-sama? Don't you feel any sort of connection with her as her contracted partner?
Unfortunately, while Bearco and I are deeply connected in spirit, we don't have any real sensory link. Well, she once said she could feel me, but I've never been able to feel her.
Useless.
Shut up!
Turning his face away from Ram, who sighed, Subaru leaned in slightly towards Anastasia and whispered to her, glancing at her composed profile.
So, can you fight? What's the deal?
If it comes down to it, of course I will. But it would mean shaving off Anna's life. As for me, I'd like to avoid that if possible. I'll be counting on you two.
Those expectations will probably get betrayed. Not sure if that'd be good in a way or a bad way, though.
Subaru snorted at Anastasia, whose expression for a moment had become that of Echidna. Then, he turned towards Patrasche, who stood quietly awaiting instructions and stroked her nose with his hand. The jet black ground dragon silently leaned in, rubbing her tough scales against Subaru.
Ow! Ow! Still, I feel better now. Without Amelia or Beatrice here. But just having you with me is a relief. But seriously, this group setup seems totally meaningless.
Patrasche.
Sharing his unease with Patrasche, Subaru turned at the sound of Ram calling him. Ram had her arms crossed and gestured with her chin towards the direction Anastasia had come from.
We can't stay put forever. We need to move if we're going to regroup with the others. Thankfully, thanks to Anastasia-sama, we have light. We can press on.
Oh, wait. Was this like something Anastasia brought?
Right before the dragon carriage got swallowed up, I just barely managed to grab the emergency pack you'd prepped, Natsuki-kun. So, thanks to that, we've got a light, a knife, and some emergency rations.
Anastasia pointed at Patrasche, where a small emergency bag was hanging on the saddle. It was that equipment that Subaru had prepared for the dragon carriage as a literal emergency kit. He felt a bit relieved, even though he'd hoped it wouldn't be needed. It was proving helpful now.
You shouldn't make fun of the wit I have in hand, after all. From now on, let's not forget to check the emergency door at any place we stay in for the first time.
Jokes aside, it is Barsu's credit. So, a light will be given to you as a reward, so go ahead and lead the way.
Sure thing. Wait! This is a reward?
Passing him the lantern, both Ram and Anastasia got on Patrasche's back. This scene, regardless of how anyone saw it, putting Subaru in the position of a servant.
3 people riding might be... maybe if Ram-san and I scooted in a bit, we could manage?
Let's not, Anastasia-sama. If we were that close together, one can imagine Barsu using the opportunity to press his body up against us.
You can imagine what you want, but if that's the game you're playing, I'll imagine something even worse! And I'm not bluffing! Don't underestimate puberty!
Raising his middle finger in protest, even Anastasia gave a wry smile. Ram's response was the same as usual, but Subaru, lantern in hand, started walking deeper into the hollow. As if forgetting the situation entirely, the banter and quips Subaru and Ram, surely it was just bluster, an overcompensation to avoid staring directly at the anxiety each of them held inside. Most likely, both of them realized that, but neither said anything about it. Although walking was a struggle, Subaru and the others were advancing through the large cave in the sand. As expected, Patrasche was used to it, and there would not be any problem with her movement, even if 2 heavy stones were put on her back. Subaru had learned the technique for walking in the desert for these past few days, and was able to proceed without much difficulty, albeit there was the feeling of sand entering his boots.
The wind? I can kind of feel it. And also can't.
I feel it, but given how thin this wind is, it's still a long way from being connected to the above ground.
Along the way, wetting his finger on his tongue, Subaru tried to examine the airflow, but it was not quite clear. On the other hand, the wind-sensitive Ram feeling it out, she had concluded that the exit was still far ahead. The way to this exit was what he wanted to give priority to, looking to meet up with his companions. Unfortunately, though, there was no indication that the signs of wind would be very reliable.
Amelia-sama and Julia-sama should not get lost due to the guidance of the microspirits. That is why I suspect that there is malicious intent in the selection of this grouping.
Well, it's quite useful to be guided by a microspirit. Damn. In my case, Peiko's so strong that she keeps the microspirits away. She's far beyond their capacity.
What became clear was that Amelia and Julius had advantages outside of battle as well. When setting out to look for a lost member, the search may not go as smoothly if they are left to do what they feel. They could only try not to overlook anything around them as much as possible while proceeding.
Before Natsuki-kun woke up, Ram-san seemed considerably shaken. She could not find Ram-san, but it seems to be hiding a bit of her attitude now.
Is that so?
Secretly, Anastasia shared this anecdote, which made his fighting with Ram after waking up feeling more and more awkward. Subaru had spent the past year alongside Ram after she had the memories of her sister completely erased. Any connection those two previously had must have left behind some remains after being wiped. If no one else, Subaru at least had to believe so.
Well, it is not fun seeing you huddled up all gloomy and miserable like that, so why not look ahead if you are so down about it? If you do not, you might miss something important.
Don't throw me off like that. You, stop giving me those platitudes. You're taking after your creator, enticing people like that.
Sooner or later, I wish you would start thinking of me separately from my creator. Girls will not like you if you are so insistent. This is something I have picked up with time.
It's not like I know any other approach. I'll just keep it in the back of my mind.
The tongue-in-cheek talkative exchange seemed to distract the impatience and anxiety of not making any progress. In the mindset of that conversation, the party advanced through the large cave. Nothing really changed about the sand path and the sand walls. While walking along that path, there were a few things about it that was...
Even though I said to be wary that this might be a witch beast nest, we have yet to run into a witch beast.
That is what Ram is concerned about.
Kicking the sand under his feet, Subaru grumbled at Ram as she expressed a similar opinion. They continued into the large cave, and soon an hour had already passed. With no one and nothing around, their anxiety, impatience, and bad premonitions continued to grow. Of course, not having enemies show up was a welcome situation, but the extensive silence could not be of any help in wiping out the bad feeling regarding this place. It was much like being detached from the whole world.
No way. We couldn't have been swallowed up by a hyperspace that doesn't connect to anywhere. Right?
Well then, wouldn't you tell me where the wind we're relying on's coming from? Do you think it's the heavy breathing of an unusually big and ferocious witch beast who owns the cave?
No, I'm scared. That wasn't funny at all.
Really, it wouldn't be strange if anything happened at this point. He'd already seen the world tear open with his own eyes. No matter where that rupture might lead, it probably wouldn't be something to be surprised about.
Setting aside how malicious the grouping seems, I doubt the ones behind the illusion expected it to be broken. The nullification wasn't intentional. It's probably just a fluke.
What do you mean exactly?
In other words, imagining worst-case scenario like this path leading straight into a witch beast's stomach is a waste of time. Just look.
The lack of progress was leading to pessimistic theories, which Ramit rationally rejected. Then, at the end of the explanation, she urged Subaru to look ahead, him having stopped. Following her indication, Subaru held out the lantern to look forward. Then, the illuminated passage of the cavity became narrow, in front of their eyes.
It's a fork.
Right or left? We gotta make a choice. What do we do?
From what I know, Kurapika said to choose right when the time called for it.
Who's that?
At it in practical terms, he remembered hearing that people tended to unconsciously choose to proceed left when they got lost. Perhaps it had to do with dominance, such as the dominant hand, dominant leg, and other complicated factors like those. That was said to be one way of thinking about it. For that reason, Subaru wanted to follow the theory of an intellectual character he knew and choose the right path which he thought was correct. But...
So, Barasu, which way do you want to go?
Honestly speaking, left.
What happened to Kurapika?
Who's that?
answered, Rom followed up with another question, and Anastasia poked fun at the whole thing. If taken purely at face value, that exchange might have seemed like nothing more than a normal conversation. But in reality, the three people who exchanged words had a stiff expression and worrisome looks on their faces. On top of that, even Patrasche, unable to speak, was staring at the right path with stern eyes. The cause was the overwhelming negativity they were feeling from the right path. Abstractly speaking, they felt a detestable premonition. If more words were to be used, what they felt was more like dread. Their instincts were ringing the alarm bell. Selecting the right path would be deadly.
The right... I think it's bad. I've got a feeling nothing good's gonna come from it.
Surprisingly, I agree with Barasu. What do you think, Anastasia-sama?
If done the Kararagi way, majority wins, by the support of 2 votes. Besides, I'm honestly lacking the courage to choose the right side.
As if to say, I don't have the guts to do that, Anastasia swung both hands in front of her, a gesture that answered for everyone. Subaru was not the only one. Rom and Anastasia both felt a strange sensation from the right path. Patrasche did as well. Therefore, the right road could not be chosen.
Then, left it is. Oh, this also feels like we're being made to choose it, which makes it an unpleasant option.
Well, we could go back, but there's nothing to gain from it.
Could say we've got nothing to lose, but that's being a little negative.
As Subaru failed to make a decision, Rom and Anastasia seemed ready to jump in. Reluctantly shrugging his shoulders, Subaru stepped forth, walking in front of Patrasche, straight towards the road on the left. Despite his hesitation, by proceeding that direction, the path on the right would deviate greatly from the large cavity. He found that the pressure that he felt through the walls of sand kept disappearing further and further, and the stiffness in his shoulders was naturally released.
What an unpleasant place.
She felt the same thing, and as he heard Rom murmuring, Subaru agreed in silence. At this crossroads, the right path caused overwhelming negative thoughts. They chose the left road out of something like instinct to avoid the other, but there was one more reason. Inside his chest, Subaru felt the presence of something shouting in joy towards the right path. It would be dreadful to listen to what it said. It was also undeniably a major factor as to why Subaru did not opt for that road. Team non-combatant trapezed through the cave, and a few more hours passed after the fork. As they slowly advanced their search in the great cavern, the number of words spoken between the three dropped drastically. While their fatigue, and not to mention the darkness, any sense of time was fuzzy, but what was truly wearing down their spirit along the walk was silence. In fact, Subaru felt like several hours had passed, but he did not know if it was true. There was the possibility that they had utilized the time better than they thought, or even that they had completely squandered it. What they knew for sure was that there was no progress.
At that split. I wonder if we should have gone right.
After that much silence, you can only think to complain? Stop it. It's shameful.
Murmuring, he moved his dry lips to complain, and Rom bitterly delivered a stab. However, her poison also lacked ambition. He could tell that she too had been gripped by the fear that they wouldn't find anything. Although the foothold along the path of sand was shoddy, there was some confidence that they had already walked for a few kilometers. So with no end to the cave in sight, it could not be helped that they would be swept over by a bad feeling. It was natural that one would doubt that the wrong choice had been made. Even more, if they reached a dead end, they would give up and turn back.
The barrage of lights above ground. What do you think it was?
Subaru changed the direction of the topic, for fear that the negative conversation would continue as it was. The topic that turned up was the light of the watchtower that had triggered this situation in the first place. The defense mechanism of the dunes, which was believed to have been prepared by the sage.
It was a needle.
A needle?
To that question, Rom responded curtly. She spilled a sigh at Subaru's follow-up question and gently stroked her pink hair.
I do not know its principle in detail, but long and narrow needles enchanted with magic were being fired. The needles carried high heat, probably the effect of firing magic, but the needle itself seemed to be of some specialized construction. As it was repelled and fell in the sand, it disintegrated and disappeared.
You got such a good glance at it during all that uproar.
A quick glance would tell you that much.
Without a doubt, it seemed Rom's observation power was not as ordinary as she claimed it to be. In fact, with Subaru just staring at her, Anastasia shook her head in amazement. In Rom's case, she was aware of her own talents, but was still speaking sarcastically. Despite that, it was quite the analysis.
What do you think its purpose was?
Kill those approaching the watchtower. It is a mystery why it was relentlessly aimed at Barasu. Standard practice to take down the weaker enemies first, so that might be it.
Shit! I can't deny it!
Be only natural to arrive at the same conclusion when taking a bird's eye look at it. Nonetheless, thanks to that, there had been no casualties among those of the party. The conclusion to be reached here was that it was good to have a weak Subaru donning invincible magic. But in that case,
It means a friendly encounter with the sage would be difficult.
I think it's premature to say so. Looking at it from their point of view, they didn't know who we were nor what we wanted, right? There's a chance for a discussion to occur. Is that what I think?
At worst, our business is with the sage's knowledge, not their personality. If they do not speak, you can just tie them up and make them taste an adequate level of pain until they do.
Nay, Summer! Was that your villainous side talking?
If there is something you want, take measures. This is not mere child's play.
Rom remained strangely calm in the face of Subaru's astonishment. Just hearing those statements, he felt he was being reminded of how innocent and shallow his own resolutions were. Regardless of whether it was actually put into practice, there was no doubt that Rom was prepared for it. That was not but proof that she was serious about Rem. To touch Rem's resolve, Subaru would be required to make some decisions regarding his own resolutions. He had not thought of getting his hands dirty for Rem. Rem was not to be blamed for that either. What he had to do was to be prepared to reap the results. When confronted with the existence of the sage, no matter what kind of opponent that is, he must be absolutely determined. He must be resolved to that degree.
Huh?
Patrasche?
At the same time Subaru bit his lips with those thoughts, Patrasche held her breath. The ground dragon was glaring at the path with squinted eyes and neighed a little. Having noticed that stare, Subaru also stopped his feet and returned to soothe the ground dragon. He stroked the back of her neck and called out, "What's wrong?"
Did you see something? What?
The reason would be this.
On Patrasche's behalf spoke Ram, interrupting Subaru. Anastasia frowned and looked at the passage, imitating Patrasche. Of course, nothing could be seen within the extent of that darkness, but a different feeling was being stimulated rather than sight. Seeping into their nasal orifices was a smell of something burning.
Don't you think it smells like fire?
I cannot think of anything else. But I do not think something like a kitchen could possibly be down here.
If this is fire, the cause behind this smell is civilized people, right?
Mm-hmm.
At Subaru's clinging question, neither Ram nor Anastasia could just easily nod. He could also understand the girl's judgment, but the smell that was drifting was clearly a scent of something supposedly burning. Ram said it was something like cooking. The aroma wafting through the air was similar enough. A bonfire, or a stew for a meal. If that was the case,
Do you think there's a possibility of that being Amelia and the others?
Assuming they were sent to the same place, there's enough possibility. Nevertheless, whether it's rational or unwise to use a fire in such situation, I'd leave that judgment up to the others.
here, the answer regarding who was ahead of the road would not arrive. The idea of beckoning and checking the intents of the other party came to mind, but
Even if they're at the end of the path, it doesn't mean they're friendly.
supposing it was not Amelia and the others, could it be the sage? It was hard to believe that the sage, who should be in the watchtower, would come down, but it was not unlikely. In that case, if the sage continued to be hostile, a corresponding assault was also to be expected.
Should we cover our light and move ahead? If they're using fire, then there's the light on their end. Worst case, it's fine if we keep ours hidden.
It's strange to keep speculating about it. We also gotta check what's the cause, so I think it's a reasonable idea.
Anastasia nodded to Subaru's proposal, and after that, Raum also quietly agreed with it. When the lights of the 2 lanterns were turned off, the party went back to the path where the smell of fire was drifting from, relying only on Subaru's light.
Barasu,
What?
if anything happens to you, we will leave you here and run away. Try not to hold a grudge.
If you do that, I'll curse you!
Raum's words were those of encouragement, perhaps because she knew he would be fearful. In the light held by Subaru, Raum slightly loosened her lips, and Subaru went straight through the passage. Feeling Patrasche's breath behind him, the scent of the fire gradually grew more intense.
Huh? It's the light!
Beyond the passage, he found a slightly shimmering red light. Subaru immediately darkened his own light and instructed the 3 behind him to be silent. Then he squatted down and stepped on the sand stealthily to confirm the existence of the light. 1 step, 2 steps. As he moved forward, he could see that the light was on the other side of a corner. The passage was slightly bent to the left, and the fire was just beyond there. Quietly reaching the bend, he took a peek at the other side ever so slightly while leaning against the wall. At that moment, a wind carrying a slight heat tickled Subaru's forehead, and he unintentionally closed his eyes. Immediately after, Subaru's footing dug into the soil unexpectedly. The sand slid, and his body rolled down.
What?
Incapable of withstanding that surprise, Subaru forgot to hold on and rolled down the slope. The fine particles of sand were hard to grab onto, and so he slid all the way down to the bottom. Plunging headfirst into a pile of sand after rolling down a steep incline of about 10 meters of height, Subaru again spat out sand and raised his body.
Again? Sand? No! Then...
Subaru shook his head and looked around. With the shock, he had dropped his lantern. As it was nearby, he started searching for it, stretching his hand, and he touched something hard. For an instant, he thought he had found the lantern, but it felt different compared to the hardness of what he had held. The surface was crisp and pleasant to the touch, like a wooden stick. Despite its thickness and length, he judged it light when lifting it up.
What is it?
In that pitch-black darkness, even getting closer to it and straining his eyes would not relay to him its identity. Smelling it timidly, the smell of charcoal was felt. The very next moment after he thought that, a light appeared behind him suddenly. The wisps that appeared in the background were red, shimmering and primitive, their name flames. Then, as the flames began to light up the world, Subaru saw the true identity of the thing he had grabbed. Probably, it was a creature's foot. Something that had once been an animal, burned until it turned into charred remains. And around the place where Subaru was sitting, the remnants of former creatures that had become lumps of charcoal were scattered. Subaru had slipped right into the middle of countless, burned, dead bodies.
Huh?
Throwing away the charred waste in his hand, Subaru aimed to retreat. However, a terrible flame existed at his rear, and his neck was burned by the heat wave. And this time, he fell down just on his face. And finally, he turned back and looked at it directly. Subaru was thrown out of reality, facing a tremendous roar from his front. Why were all the witch beast's roars so disgusting as to irritate human beings to the limit of their disgust? With such a high-pitched roar, it was like countless babies were crying all at once. It was a blasphemous creature that Subaru had never seen. It burned red in a place full of burned bodies. It truly was a witch beast, but the color of its fur was different from what he had seen in the past. As far as Subaru knew, all the witch beasts were distorted and ugly, but they were often in a form such that they bore a resemblance to an existing creature somehow. That applied all the same for the white whale or the great rabbit. For all cases, there was a basic foundation of an animal. However, this time, he did not wish to apply the same concept to the witch beast that existed in front of him. The witch beast once again cried out. At first glance, some similarities could be found with a horse. Thin, but strong legs of a quadruped that existed to charge over the earth. It was the same as a horse, in that it possessed a trunk supported by its 4 legs and a long tail swaying from its rear. However, there was a human torso in the part where the horse's neck should normally be, leading to the head. Compounding on the 4 legs, the human torso possessed 2 further arms, and there was no head above the neck of the human torso. As from the neck to the top, a horn protruded. It was the mark of a witch beast, a mark that branded it as something decisively different from other animals. In place of its head, a horn grew. It possessed no head. But if that were the case, where was the mouth from which its cry was raised? From the chest to the belly of the human torso was a vertical gash, and inside the oral cavity were fully grown fangs aligned horizontally, asserting their existence.
A monster!
Even calling it a witch beast was somewhat absurd. Rather, it was a blasphemy of life. To Subaru's knowledge, it was close to a creature of fantasy called Centaur, half man and half horse. But that was a distorted figure, as if its reenactment had been abandoned halfway. From the backside of the human torso of the centaur grew a mane of flame, torso searing the sand cave with incredible power, red light urging forth. Considering the strength of that blaze, who had created all the charred carcasses that lay around the place, became clear. It had been a mistake to embrace the idea that the use of fire was a sign of civilized people. The arms of the human part of the centaur were that of a human, with 5 fingers. The legs of the horse part of the centaur were that of a horse, with hooves having been formed. The figure was about 6 or 7 meters long, just about the right size to pass through the cavern. That was to say, the master of the cavern was this being in front of him.
It was a trap!
Holding his breath, Subaru despaired. There was nothing he could do. He quickly turned his hand to the back of his waist and grabbed the handle of the whip, but he did not believe he could do anything with it. And to that breathless Subaru, the centaur tilted his eyeless head. From its mouth was hurled a bellow, inciting fear. At that moment, Subaru moved to create a gap. He turned around on the sand, roughly kicking one of the charcoal debris onto the centaur. Having been cooked to a crisp on the inside, the corpses had no power to them, even if they connected. But still, it was good to be in control. Clinging to the steep slope, he attempted to return to the upper passage. He would go back the road he came, but he did not mind it. The problem was, how far the centaur was going to give chase was unknown. Given that it burnt its prey in this manner, it was dubious whether it had an appetite. Of course, this was not necessarily a good thing, as he had heard that witch beasts possessed an instinct to hurt and murder human beings. Still, if there was a possibility that the situation could look up for a little bit, that would... While thinking so much about it, Subaru noticed that his body was not trembling. Trying and creating a diversion by kicking a piece of charred debris and climbing the steep sand slope and turning back and reaching out to his whip, Subaru could do none of this. Because before he could get to it, the breath of the witch beast burned Subaru. As soon as the concept that his whole body was being burnt reached him, Subaru screamed in pain and suffering. However, because his throat was being burnt, his lungs were having their oxygen burnt. No part of his voice could be raised. Where the burned skin formed bubbles, they swelled and burst instantly. The fluids that had flown inside the body, which he had never seen before, instantly evaporated, his blood actually boiling. Can't even roll over on the ground in this suffering. The muscles and fat had been burnt, melted and charcoaled. The pain disappeared to a place far away, and Subaru experienced an illusion of being drowned in flames. Burned. Yes, burned. He had read somewhere about burns in depth. He had learned that there were several stages of burns, and that once the third stage was reached, the scars would remain, and a skin graft would be necessary. He also had learned that if 30% of a person's body were burnt, breathing would be made difficult, leading to death. Body hair burnt till the follicle. Eardrum and brain matter alike melted and flowed out the earlobe. Lips and gums evaporated, exposing the teeth, and the tongue was gulped by the suffering of the heat wave. It did not matter. He was already drowned. These burns, could they be healed? Even though he was not confident regarding his face, if it got burnt, would they like him less? Emilia, Beatrice, Rem.
Pursue!
Burning. His field of vision was burning. Everything was burning, turning red and going white. Blood was eradicated by the tremendous heat. The eyelids melted away. The fluids of the eyeballs evaporated. It turned white and cloudy, and nothing could be seen. He had just heard something. He had heard someone calling. He had heard babies crying. Someone came down beside him. Idiot. Why had they? They had said they would run away. Why had they come down here? But going down, what did that mean? Moreover, what was left or right? A horse, a human. Different. Hot. It melted. It burned. Tired. Melted and disappeared.
How long are you planning to sleep? Wake up already, Barsu.
As he felt the sensation of his limbs completely ceasing to move and his scorched thoughts collapsing, Subaru was yanked back into reality by a sharp jolt. Startled by the suddenness of it, he sat up and wiped the cold sweat off his sand-stuck forehead. He looked around. It was dark. Nothing was visible. That alone was enough to evoke the terror from just a few seconds ago.
Pathetic. How frightened can you be of mere darkness? You're not a child.
Huh?
Shrinking back instinctively, Subaru opened his eyes wide at that voice. Holding the lantern so that its light illuminated her own face, Ram let out a small sigh. Then, kneeling quietly beside him, she reached out and gently stroked his cheek.
What a pitiful face.
My face. It's not melted or anything.
Except in front of Amelia-sama. I have never seen such a pitiful sight.
The warmth of her palm on his cheek was far, far gentler than the heat he had just experienced. Thanks to that feeling, thanks to the sensation of flames and the warmth of another, Subaru understood that he had returned by death, again. That this was a different save point from the two deaths he had met in the sand dunes. And that in order to conquer the sand labyrinth, he would have to stake his life. He felt like the cold sand flowing on the sandsea was silently ridiculing the scorched Subaru, watching.